A new tax regime is on the horizon as the Nigerian Revenue Service Bill and the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill have been considered for third reading and passed by the Senate. This comes after the presentation yesterday by a special committee, the Finance Committee, and a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. The remaining two of the four tax reform bills, that is the Nigerian Tax Bill and the Joint Revenue Board Bill, are slated for passage today, 8th of May 2025. Senate President Godswill Akpabio commended the progress, highlighting that the bills would not only enhance governance but also revolutionize tax collection and distribution across the country.
The Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act number 13, 2007, and then enact the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act to establish the Nigerian Revenue Service, charged with the powers of assessment, collection of, and accounting for revenue accruing to the government of the Federation and for related matters 2025, third reading taken and passed.
All right, Yomi Olugbenro, partner and West African tax leader at Deloitte, and as well a member of the committee that put this bill together, joins me for this conversation. It's a pleasure to have you in.
Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be on your show.
Right, always. We know that the Senate yesterday passed two of the four controversial tax reform bills transmitted to it for approval last year, October. And based on what has been passed so far, what changes for the tax system that already exists and the Nigerian, you and I?
Well, thank you. No, I think it's exciting news. When the news filtered in yesterday that two of the four bills have been, have gone through third reading and passed by the Senate, I think quite a lot of excitement was generated. Like you said in your intro, the Nigerian Revenue Service Bill and the Nigerian Tax Admin Bill passed. So what has changed is that we are inching closer to the opportunity to really experience the transformative provisions that are contained in this bill. Quite a lot have been said, about this reform and how there is a holistic plan, to overhaul the entire tax system, deal with all of the burdensome provisions that we know, provide relief and succor for the vulnerable, and ultimately help government to raise more revenue in a responsive and in a progressive manner. So everyone is looking forward to the passage of the remaining two bills. I believe the conversation continues today, and hopefully today, or at least before the end of the week, we can have the remaining two bills passed by the Senate. The House of Rep already done that, and so we move on to the next phase of having harmonization and subsequently passing it for assets.
Right, so there's still quite some way to go, but like you said, it's an overhaul. So much changes, from what that word means. The initial tax reform bill that caused a bit of a stir proposed that a hefty 6% of the VAT revenue for states and local governments will be disbursed based on derivations, basically where the VAT was collected or consumed. And this caused quite the stir. That some states, particularly in the north, might get a smaller share. So how does the formula now in the initial tax reform bill differ from what has been passed by the Senate now?
Well, you're right. I think that was one of the highlights of the conversation we've had over the last month was the one that zeroed in on VAT. And I think quite a lot of conversations and consultation had happened. The proposal that was in the original bill was that 60% will be based on derivation. And maybe if I step back a little, there are actually two dimensions to how the entire revenue in the VAT pool is shared. First is what percentage, first of all, go to federal, and what percentage goes to state, and what percentage goes to local. And then within the basket of what goes to state and what goes to local, how do you then do the allocation among them, among all of the among the states, for example? So the original provision we had in in our tax law is that 15%, right, of the entire VAT revenue goes to federal government, and state and local government share the remaining 85, i.e. 50% to state and 35% to local, right? Now, the proposal in the bill is that the share of the federal government be reduced by 5% and added to states, so that federal government only take 10% and state government will increase its stake from 50 to 55 and local government will take 35. So the controversy was really around the one that then goes to the state and then to the local government. How do you then allocate it, among all of the states? And the original proposal was informed by the fact that the committee was looking at quite a lot of issues beyond just the percentage. The committee was also particular about what constitutes derivation. How do we determine derivation? And quite a lot of work went into all of that. So in the committee's own wisdom, it has initially recommended that a lot be put on derivation, because again, there was a thinking that the basis of arriving at what is derivation is then more fair and is then more even among the states, and that 40% is what then goes to equality and population. But all of that went through all of the debate that you mentioned, and the proposal, as we believe we currently have in this bill that was passed, is that equality takes back the lion's share that it has always been. In the old law, it is 50% of the revenue that is shared based on equality. And so the recommendation is that we should stick to that. So 50% is still going to be based on equality. So no longer 60% on derivation as the original proposals recommend. And then the remaining 50% will then be between derivation and population. In the old law, derivation was 20, population was 30. Now, in this new proposal, as we currently have it as of today, 30% will be based on derivation and 20% will be on population. So it's 50% equality, 30% derivation, and 20% based on population. And it appears as though quite a lot of stakeholders are more comfortable with this, latest recommendation. And if that is what we need to get everybody to buy in, and then to keep working at ensuring that we'll improve the system, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and we can always make amend in the future if the authorities consider that there's a need to do so.
Yes, and of course there may be, who knows. Another thing that the upper chamber did was they also rejected the proposal to increase value-added tax to 10%, opting to retain the current rate at 7.5%. Is this a welcome development by all, especially in view of the current revenue crunch and our current debt position? Do you view this as us kicking the can further down the road?
Well, again, when you are making a change of this type of scale, there has to be concession and compromises here and there. I believe that to the general community, to the citizens and the taxpayers, that's a huge welcome development. So no matter how we try to explain that inflation will not increase, or there are measures to fight and combat inflation, to taxpayer, 7.5% is definitely way more acceptable than 10%. But to the government will ordinarily have preferred an increase because of the need to augment, or to balance the book, as it were, because quite a lot of concession has been given and a lot of reliefs have been given. But again, you make a reform like this, considering so many things that is happening in the economy. There is huge cost of living crisis in the economy already. And so if there is any measure that will ensure that we don't exacerbate that any further, it will then be a welcome development. Again, the original proposal was that we have progressive increase, up to 2030. When we see the final bill, we're not sure yet whether what the Senate has done is to just hold the rate currently at 7.5% for current year. We need to see exactly what they are then recommending for future. As it is now, it's not yet clear whether it's 7.5%, and no changes in the subsequent years. What I probably will expect is that for the current year, the proposal to increase it to 10 is held back at 7.5. But then over the next coming years, the expectation is that as things improve, as the economy, generally rebound, there will then be, the headroom to be able to increase it progressively, so that we can essentially help the government to raise as much revenue as is required to defray the cost of governance.
All right, so it's a step-by-step, long journey, if I can put it that way. But just last week at the IMF World Bank Spring meetings, we know that the emphasis for emerging markets, developing nations was on fiscal consolidation measures and that's to address, of course, the budget deficits. A key means of doing so recommended was through tax. Looking at what has been passed and what has been amended, are we in line, or it's more important that we put these recommendations in context and align with what we have going on here in Nigeria?
I believe we're really in line for, along that type of reform. The whole focus of this tax reform is essentially focused on, revenue transformation. It was already identified that the government cannot continue to focus, mainly on resource revenue, and that we really need to grow our non-oil revenue. We need to grow, the revenue that comes from government assets and government investments. We need to drive efficiency with government-owned enterprises, and all of that are already covered in this proposal. So we're already in line. You can see how just within a couple of weeks or months, the entire federal government budget for 2025 is impacted by the trade tariff war, and then the impact on oil prices and all of that. So a country cannot subject itself to that level of volatility from revenue sources that is so largely outside of its control. And so this reform already conceptualized that, and the expectation is that if we push through this reform and we implement consensuously, we will have done quite a lot in ensuring that we break free from the undue dependence on oil revenue, and that the government can increase its non-oil revenue sources.
Mm-hmm. Again, still a long way to go, but you were a part of this committee that put this together. Are you satisfied with the outcome so far? And obviously, you've mentioned today we're waiting for the two other bills to be passed. There's the harmonization that you mentioned, and other things to be done as well. Are you satisfied with where we are now? And what key factors do you think will drive enforcement, compliance, implementation?
Yes, I am. It's huge progress. It's huge progress. Quite a lot of work has gone in by all stakeholders. I was privileged to be a member of the committee, but it was quite a large team with so many people involved in the consultation process, and we know how much of effort the committee chair has put in. He's practically invested his entire life, in getting this through. And we only can appreciate all the stakeholders, the National Assembly, the tax authorities, and the investing public as well. Everyone who has put their effort and their work together in getting this. But as soon as we get through, because it's still quite a journey, right? When it's passed, we need to do the harmonization. The House of Rep passed there much earlier, and so there are different versions and different harmonization that needed to be done, and we pass it for assent. We allow time for businesses to get ready their systems and processes, and then we move on to implementation, which is really where the real work is. The bill or the law, when passed, will not change the system by itself. So we need technology, we need people, we need to build capacity. We need to change, we need culture shift so that we can actually all embrace the new reform and drive it to our benefits.
All right, we'll see how this all plays out, but thank you so much for sharing your insights. Yomi Olugbenro, partner and West African tax leader at Deloitte.
Thank you, my pleasure to be here.